7,121,976 tests for coronavirus have now been carried out or posted out in the UK, and that includes 140,359 tests carried out or posted yesterday. 299,251 people have tested positive, and that is an increase of 1,115 cases since yesterday. May we have the second slide, please? So the second slide shows the latest data from hospitals. So 387 people were admitted to hospital with coronavirus in England, Wales and Northern Ireland on the 14th of June. That is down from around 435 a week earlier and down from a peak of 3,432 on the 1st of April. 379 coronavirus patients are currently in mechanical ventilation beds in the United Kingdom, and that is down from 494 a week ago, and that in turn is down from a peak of 3,301 on the 12th of April. And may we have the third slide, please? So as you'll see from the third slide, this shows what's happening in hospitals across the country. There are now 5,308 people in hospital with coronavirus in the UK. That is down 13% from 6,123 a week ago. And again, in turn, that is down from a peak of 20,698 on the 12th of April. And as you'll see from the graphs, while there is some variation, most nations and regions in the UK are broadly following a similar pattern. Now, the fourth and final slide, if we may have that, please. That shows the daily figures for those who have sadly lost their lives after testing positive for coronavirus. Across all settings, the total number of deaths now stands at 42,153. That's sadly an increase of 184 fatalities since yesterday. Now, when you measure that on a 7-day rolling average, the daily number of deaths now stands at 146. So that is down from a peak of 943 on the 14th of April. So as you'll see from all of those four slides, we are making important progress. And today actually marks another important milestone. In just under 1 hour's time, the best league in the world will be back up and running after a 100-day pause. All but 5 countries will be airing tonight's games, underlining football's global reach and the soft power of UK sport. The Premier League is returning and the world will be watching. And of course it will be a very different event to what we're used to, but there's no doubt that this is a hugely symbolic moment, an important step forward in our careful journey back towards normality. Players back in their place of work and a boost for our football-loving nation. And we've worked really hard with football authorities, police and medical experts to get to this point. But we do need fans to play their part too. So please look after your fellow fans and your communities by watching from home. To keep the home advantage, support from home. Now, all 92 remaining Premier League games will be shown live on TV. And I'm delighted that I and others managed to work hard to get a third of them on free-to-air channels. Friday will be the first free-to-air with Norwich v Southampton. Then an important day on Saturday, that will be when we have the first ever Premier League game on the BBC, followed by the Merseyside derby, again free-to-air on Sunday. And there'll be extended highlights of all the games free-to-air, so you won't have to miss a single goal. Our sportsmen and women have set some incredible examples during this pandemic, using their profiles to support worthwhile causes across the United Kingdom. England's men and women cricket teams have donated £500,000 towards charitable causes. Rugby League's Cheshire West Bank Bears have delivered food and parcels to the elderly. And of course, the England and Manchester United footballer Marcus Rashford has made the front and the back pages for the very best of reasons, highlighting the struggles facing many families during this difficult time. But that is, of course, in addition to the fantastic work he's been doing, helping to feed millions of children through the Fair Share charity. And the last 3 months really have demonstrated that immense power of sport It brings us together through kindness and common humanity. And actually I was struck by this last week when I teamed up with His Royal Highness the Duke of Cambridge and some of Britain's biggest sports stars on mental health awareness. We chatted about the need to deliver generational change in perceptions and develop tools for good mental health, whether you're a sports star at the top of your game or a junior just starting out or a fan going through a difficult period. And as we get sport back, I really think this is a great opportunity for all of us to be much more open about talking about mental health. And the sports recovery was never, though, just about elite sports. I know that countless people are itching to get back to their gyms, their leisure centres, their five-a-side leagues and all the other normal fitness activities. So we're working closely with the sector to get grassroots and community sport back up and running as soon as it is safe to do so, with an aim of the start of July at the very earliest. And as we continue our efforts to get children back to school, I want to focus on the role that sport can play in improving young people's physical and indeed their mental health. So today is an important moment in our recovery. The return of elite sport has provided a model to follow, one which is based on close partnership, working with government, sport and the medics to bring it back safely. But it's a model that we're also applying to other much loved and much missed parts of our economy, in particular the performing arts. Now, I know they face enormous challenges, particularly given the impact of social distancing on live venues. And I really am looking hard at how we can address those challenges. Over the past few weeks and months, I've been talking extensively and intensively with people from across the UK's cultural sector to try and find a way through these issues. From some of our most creative directors and producers to those running our greatest museums, theatres and music venues. And an important part of all of this is to get performances back up and running again. Now, we've made a lot of progress through the Cultural Renewal Task Force and indeed the Entertainment and Events Working Group which sits within that. However, it is clear from all of this that we do need greater flexibility to overcome some of the very specific and practical obstacles to the return of live performance. So that's why, over the next week, we will be convening experts in a targeted way, bringing together our leading performers in theatre, choirs and orchestras with medical experts and advisors. And the idea is that they will work together in detail to develop that roadmap which is so badly needed to performing safely, with a particular focus on piloting innovative ideas that may permit live performances. I know how essential our theatres, our music venues and the performing arts are to our wider cultural ecosystem. Culture is our calling card, it's respected around the world, and I am determined to work with them and across government to support it and to preserve its world-leading position. Today's return of live football represents a significant milestone, but I hope it's just another step towards normality, to be followed by many more in the months to come. Thank you. So with that, I'm now going to turn to the first two questions, both of which we are going to see on this screen, and then I will respond to them. So the first comes from Laura in Eastbourne, and she asks, theatres around the country still remain closed with no reopening date in sight. How do you expect employers to keep their staff employed and to contribute to the job retention scheme who are unable to open and have zero income? Well, Laura, look, I hope I addressed some of that in my opening remarks. The first thing that we've done to support theatres is the job retention scheme. Without the job retention scheme, literally thousands of people in theatres would have lost their jobs already. Because of the job retention scheme, the government has spent tens of millions of pounds ensuring that those people can keep their jobs. We've also introduced schemes like, for example, deferral of VAT payments and business rate deferrals and indeed business rate reliefs. Of course, I know that for theatres in particular, as we open and we've set the challenging target of the 4th of July, it's going to be exceptionally difficult for theatres to open consistent with social distancing. And that is why I continue to have discussions across government to see what further support we can give theatres during this challenging time. So hopefully that answers the first question. We are now going to go on to the second question, and this is from Val from Wetherby. She asks, what is the policy and strategy to allow visitors to relatives in care home whose mental health has been severely impacted by lockdown, whilst at the same time protecting vulnerable residents. So, look, first of all, I know, Val, and I don't know whether you have got family in care homes. I know what a terribly difficult time this has been for people who have families in care homes, not being able to see them in person. And the government really is aware of this challenge. I think it was essential that we protected people in care homes by not allowing that visiting to happen. Of course, I know that is something that my colleague, the Health Secretary, is continuing to work through, and as soon as it is safe to do so, we will ensure that that can happen. I really do understand your desire to be able to do so. So those are the two questions that we've had from the public. We're now going to turn to Hugh Pym from the BBC. Hugh, are you there?
Yes, thank you very much indeed. A couple of questions, if I may. First of all, more than 1,500 paediatricians have written to the Prime Minister saying they are very concerned that many pupils are not back in schools and are calling urgently for a plan to get them back. What's your response to that? And secondly, there were some ministers at the beginning of the crisis who were rather critical of professional footballers, leading footballers for not taking pay cuts. Has that view changed, and are you now praising them and the Games authorities for getting back from today and providing entertainment to fans?
Well, two very different questions there, Hugh. I'll try to address each one of them. First of all, on the plan to get schools back. Look, it's vitally important that we get children back to school. I know my own daughter is back at her local state school, and millions of, hundreds of thousands of kids, over 600,000 kids across the country are back at school. We've managed to get back children in reception and year 1 and indeed in year 6. Of course, we want to go further, and that's why from September we want to ensure that all schools are back. I do think it's important, though, as part of this, that we really reassure parents that it's safe for their kids to go back. And I've been really heartened by the incredible hard work that I've seen from teachers up and down the country who've worked so hard in difficult circumstances to get kids back to school. I do think it's a bit of a shame that their unions, and indeed it appears the leader of the Labour Party, is not also providing them with that kind of backing and support. In relation to professional footballers, I think it's wonderful that we've got football back, and we've worked really hard with the professional footballers and others on this, and then particularly I pay a tribute to Jonathan Van Tam, Professor Jonathan Van Tam, who's done an awful lot to reassure footballers about the safety of all of this. And I think it's entirely right that we should praise footballers for the role that they're playing in ensuring that we're able to get back to normal life as before. I think the comments you're referring to were in relation to the access to the job retention scheme. On the job retention scheme, I've always been clear, and I think most of the clubs have followed this, that you should only access the job retention scheme if you can't afford to use other means, and I think they followed that example. Do you have any follow-ups there, Hugh?
Yes, on football, once again, do you have any concerns about fans gathering at grounds, and do you have any message to them? And secondly, what about lower leagues and the financial plight of many clubs? What support or assistance can you give there?
Well, those are two important points. First of all, I hope viewers at home would have heard this message at the beginning of this. It is so important. The risk here would be if people congregate outside stadiums. It is really important to stay at home. That is an important part of saving lives in this period. We do not want people to inadvertently spread the coronavirus by being outside stadiums. But I must say that the British people, and I think fans, have shown remarkable good and common sense. They know that they shouldn't be doing this, and I really don't think they will. An important part of this has been negotiating those free-to-air matches, which will give people the opportunity to watch a large number of those matches live at home if they don't have subscriptions, and indeed to see extended highlights for the rest if they don't have subscriptions. The second point, forgive me, Hugh, what was the second point that you raised?
About lower league clubs.
Yeah, so lower league clubs, I think Throughout all of this, I think the best thing we can do for football is to get it up and running again. So, of course, by getting the Premiership and the Premier League and the Championship back up and running, that is releasing funds that would otherwise have been foregone. Those clubs would have had to have made penalty payments to the broadcasters. So that gets more money into the sports, and of course that can then be shared through the football pyramid. I hope, and actually the next stage in reopening, so we've had 3 stages in reopening. The first stage was socially distant training. The second was contact training. The third has been the return of live sport behind closed doors. The 4th stage will be international competition. And the 5th stage will then be about seeing whether it's safe for fans to return to stadiums. Just today we've had very productive discussions about this. I would really hope that by the return of the new season, we might be in a position whereby some fans could start to return to stadiums. And I know that would be another important part of restoring the financial position of clubs. Thanks for those questions. And now over to Robert Peston from ITV.
Secretary of State, can you tell us whether there is any chance that within a year we will be back in stadiums, in theatres, in entertainment venues? And if you can't, what can you do to stop the hundreds of thousands of job losses that look set to come within weeks, long before the coronavirus job retention scheme ends in October, as Cameron McIntosh's announcement of redundancies today shows all too clearly?
Well, thank you for those questions, Robert. I should also give you a follow-up to a question you asked me when I was on your show last week. I'm pleased to say that Royal Parks are starting to open their loos. Every Royal Park, I think, has got at least one loo open, and more will be opening up.
Question.
In relation to the other points you raised, look, I really want, and I understand the need for all of these venues to return with people in them, and indeed eventually without social distancing. But that can only be done if the public health allows it to happen. And I think you see different scenarios. So I think in relation to stadium, where people are outside and they're much bigger and there's more scope for social distancing, it may well be that you could do that sooner. I know particularly with the performing arts and theatres, when you're doing that in a confined space, there are greater risks there. This is why we've given it a lot of attention. The first step is that we have extended the job retention scheme through to the end of October. But of course, I'm continuing to work with everyone across industry to look at what further support we can give them, indeed across government. And you mentioned Cameron McIntosh. Cameron McIntosh is just one of dozens of people that I've spoken to on a one-to-one basis. So I'm very familiar with the challenges that are being faced, and we are working to resolve them. Any follow-ups?
Yes, on a completely unrelated note, many of us have seen the picture of the security car bashing into the Prime Minister's car this afternoon, with the protester running out. Are there security implications of all of that you need to look into?
Well, I don't know about the security implications. I don't believe that there are. I can update you, and I've just been updated prior to this press conference. I'm happy to say that the Prime Minister is wholly unscathed, and I believe that everyone else escaped safely from that situation. So thanks for that question. Now on to Hugh Woozencraft from TalkSport. Hi, Hugh.
Hello, thank you very much. You've joined the Premier League in urging fans to stay at home to watch and listen to Premier League matches. But what specific advice have you given the police if fans do turn up outside stadia? And what is the threshold for moving matches to neutral venues if there are any issues? And secondly, our listeners at TalkSport would love to see Marcus Rashford of Manchester United formally recognised for some of the work that he's been doing, helping to provide free school meal vouchers during the school holidays. So what do you think? Is it a rise, Sir Marcus?
Well, on your first question, it's an important point, and actually just before this press conference I was speaking to the policing minister about this, and clearly we have been working across the policing authorities. We've worked very closely in developing all of these plans, and we've been very clear from the beginning that this is one of the risks. Of course, police have appropriate powers and they will be able to use them as necessary, but I really hope that this situation won't arise in the first place, and I really do trust good sense of football fans up and down the country, and indeed the British public, to know that you can watch this safely at home. There's nothing to be gained from congregating outside a stadium. The only thing that could happen if you congregated outside a stadium is to put at risk public health. On Marcus Rashford, yes, I've been very impressed at his lobbying skills. Sadly, it's not within my purview to award knighthoods or anything else, but we'll see what happens on that front. Any follow-ups?
Yes, just on the return of TalkSport listeners and football fans into stadium, what are the specific requirements that need to be met before you allow fans back into stadiums? And tonight in the Premier League and for the first round of matches, thank you NHS, and also Black Lives Matter will be on the shirt of Premier League players. I wondered what your views were on that.
Well, first of all, on the steps to return fans to stadiums, it will be a similar process to what we've gone through with the return of live sport behind closed doors. So we are having intensive engagement to look at how that could be done safely. Clearly, we will not only look at the positioning of fans and where they are relative to each other, but there's all the issues about how you get in and out of stadiums in a safe way, how you have access to conveniences and everything else. And I want to be clear on this. We are having these discussions. I'm not at this stage indicating that this is going to happen, but of course that it is the final step in the five-stage process. In respect of what Premier League players have got on their shirts, look, I think it's up to everyone how they wish to mark Black Lives Matter, and indeed the NHS. They've taken that decision, and that's great for them to mark it in the way that they want to. My focus clearly as a minister is about creating opportunities. So, for example, I was really pleased last week to announce in relation to artificial intelligence, which is another bit of my brief, we're creating a conversion course there, and we've reserved 1,000 places on that conversion course for people who don't typically access it. So my focus is on creating those opportunities. So thanks very much for those questions. Now we are on to Gordon Rayner for the Daily Telegraph. Gordon.
Good afternoon, Secretary of State. Thank you. On the subject of theatres and cinemas, Sir Patrick Balance was talking yesterday about the idea that the 2-metre rule was not set in stone. It could be flexible, perhaps. He talked about people sitting side by side, people wearing face masks, people being in ventilated areas. I just wondered if they're some of the things that you've been talking to theatres and cinemas about, and if perhaps you're thinking of opening them up with by using face masks or other means. They obviously rely hugely on large numbers of people being crammed in side by side. Is that one of the things that you're perhaps looking at to get theatres and cinemas reopened? And just a small point, could you ask as Culture Secretary how it's made you feel seeing some of our most loved public monuments, like the statue of Churchill, boarded up over the last few days?
Thanks for both those questions. So the first one, I think there's actually 2 or maybe even 3 parts to it. So on the 2-metre versus 1-metre, we've got this review ongoing, and we will look at it in the way that you described. Now, that if, and it's clear, and if it was dependent on public health, if we were in the situation where we got down to 1 metre, I think that would be of more benefit to cinemas, because I think they are better able to operate at lower capacities. It will still be immensely challenging for theatres. Theatres, as you say, really do rely, not just in terms of the atmosphere, but the profit margins. They work on wafer thin profit margins. They need lots of people packed in. I have been in touch with Andrew Lloyd Webber and others about, for example, what they've done in Seoul in relation to one of his productions. And we are looking at that, and that's why, as I announced at the beginning of this press conference, we're creating a specific group to challenge all those kind of things. But I do have to say that that to be very challenging to be able to do that. I think that in itself will not be enough to overcome the wider challenges around social distancing. That's to say that social distancing plays a very important part in reducing the spread of the disease. So I think we may be looking at some time for theatres to be returning to a state of where they can perform extensively, which is why I've been discussing what other support we can provide them with. In relation to statues, I think statues have huge symbolic value, particularly the cenotaph. So I was in touch with English Heritage on Monday, and I'm glad that English Heritage have removed the hoarding around the cenotaph. And my office has been in touch with the Mayor's office around the Churchill statue. The Churchill statue is under his purview because it sits within the GLA. And I'm hopeful that the Mayor will remove that. I think it's particularly important that this should happen, given that President Macron will be visiting shortly to mark that famous address from de Gaulle. To have Churchill covered up at that point would not be a great look, but I think the Mayor appreciates that. Thanks. Any other follow-ups there, Gordon?
Well, I just felt I ought to ask you about the admission by Downing Street today that the Prime Minister is spending nearly £1 million having his Voyager aircraft repainted to have a Union flag colour scheme on it. Is that honestly the best use of taxpayers' money, do you think?
Well, actually, I think that we have always spent money on promoting the UK around the world. If you look at the Great Campaign, and I see this with creative industries, and creative industries, we genuinely are a creative industries superpower, and we should be promoting that, and we've done that through the Great Campaign. And I think that the work on Voyager is part of that promotion. So thanks for those questions. And now over to Seb Payne at the FT.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dowden. At one of these press conferences a month ago, you said that you hoped the British tourism industry would be up and running again by the beginning of July. If that's still your intention, when will you tell people about when they can go on holiday within the UK? Because most folks need a bit more than 2 weeks' notice. And it was good to hear your news earlier, Mr. Dowden, about toilets within the royal parks. But I was wondering what else this government is doing to help open more public toilets. You've urged people to go back to shops and have said people can socialise outside. But without those toilets open, it risks turning our parks and streets into cesspits. Thank you.
Well, thanks for both those questions. Yeah, as I announced at this press conference, or didn't announce at this press conference, I confirmed what the Prime Minister had said at this press conference a month ago. We've set out a roadmap, and you saw the latest stage on delivering on that roadmap at the beginning of this week with the opening of non-essential retail. The next stage on this roadmap is the 4th of July. I very much hope that we will be able to stick to that roadmap and we will see tourism return to the UK. I'm a huge fan of British holidays. I've holidayed from everywhere from the Lake District to Northumbria to Devon, Cornwall, Dorset, Norfolk, all these wonderful places. And I want to be out there making the case for people to do that. But of course, we can only do so when it is safe to do so. So we will publish the guidance in due course. We've made a lot of progress with it, but the key thing is ensuring that it's safe to do so. On toilets, I should emphasise that toilets don't actually fall within my ministerial portfolio aside from the Royal Parks, which is one of DCMS's arm's length bodies. But I know that Secretary of State for MHCLG has set very clear guidance for local authorities that they should be opening those toilets, and I very much agree with that. Any other follow-ups, Seb?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Dowden. Earlier, a couple of weeks ago, this government said we shouldn't expect to have any summer holidays abroad, but now there's been reports that the government is close to securing air bridges to allow Brits to go on holiday to Spain or Greece. Do you expect us to be able to go on holiday, say, by August? Thank you.
Well, look, first of all, it's worth remembering how this situation has arisen. So as we've got the case of coronavirus under control, and you saw further progress today on that front, we want to ensure that we don't import cases from other countries, thereby causing the numbers to rise. So we put in place this quarantine regime. Now that we've got that in place, we are looking at, for example, corridors, whereby particularly in countries that have low infection rates, we could allow travel between the United Kingdom and those countries. I know that the Transport Secretary is working intensively on this alongside the Prime Minister and others, and I'm hopeful that we will be able to make some progress on that. But as always, we'll be driven by the public health in doing so. So thanks for those questions. And finally, we go to Anna Riley from the Hull Daily Mail. Hi, Anna.
Hi, thank you, Secretary of State. On Monday, I spoke to a mum who rushed out to the shops as non-essential stores were opened. But she was not there to buy anything, but heartbreakingly to sell her son's games console at cash converters in order to put food on the table for the family. The woman and her partner both worked in hospitality before they were laid off due to the lockdown and had to go on benefits for the first time in their lives. They say it's not enough money to live off and they don't know how they're going to make ends meet in the long term. What would you say to that woman and other people struggling in Hull right now?
Well, first,
and also this week,
sorry, go on.
Yeah, sorry, just a second question there. Also this week, I spoke to a grieving widow. She lost her 49-year-old wife to coronavirus within 3 days of being admitted to Hull Royal Infirmary. She had no underlying health conditions and died before even getting to meet her newly born grandson. Her widow is now part of a campaign group that thinks the government delayed its response to protect the public from catching coronavirus, and in doing so, failed to save thousands of lives that have been and still continue to be lost to this deadly virus. She believes, like former Sage member Professor Neil Ferguson, that the number of UK deaths could have been halved. That's around 20,000 lives saved if lockdown had come just a week earlier. Now, no one expects the government's response to have been perfect in handling a pandemic that the world's never seen before. But please, can you be honest? What has been the government's biggest mistake so far?
Okay, well, thank you, Anna, for those very detailed questions. The first thing I would say is my most profound sympathies to the lady who's lost family. And of course, to anyone, and many people I know have lost jobs during this coronavirus. This is not something we wanted to happen, but we have had this unprecedented public health crisis, and we've had to take very draconian measures in order to save lives and to protect the NHS. In response to that, the Chancellor has announced an unparalleled package of measures to support people. And if you take just, for example, in Hull alone, 31,900 people in Hull have benefited from the Job Retention Scheme. 4,000 businesses have benefited from the local authority grant. 6,000 people have benefited from the self-employment income scheme. So that's literally tens of millions of pounds of support. But sadly, we can't support everyone. That's, for example, why we have increased the universal credit. But in the long run, what we have to do, as long as it is safe to do so, and hospitality is an important example of this, is to reopen those sectors. And we're not doing this for some sort of ideological reason. We're doing it for precisely the reason that you set out, which is that people need to be able to get their jobs back and get back to work if it's safe to do so. And in respect of the point about when we introduced lockdown at the beginning of this crisis, ministers clearly made the decision. We were informed by scientific advice in doing so. We did so at a relatively similar stage in the progression of the disease as other countries did so. On the point about the numbers of people affected and the lessons to be learned, it really is just too early to make those sort of comparisons. Different countries have different ways of measuring it. Different countries have different demographics. Of course, there'll be a time when we need to look at all of those lessons. But I hope that you and people watching will appreciate our focus as a government and as government ministers, and indeed my focus, has to be on what we are doing to continue to control and drive down the numbers of this disease. So thank you for those questions. Did you want to have a quick follow-up? Yes, go on.
Yeah, you say the time's not right now. Will there be an inquiry in the future then as to measures that could have been put in place or lessons learned?
Yes, well,
in the future.
Thank you for those questions. Yes, of course there will be lessons that will need to be learned. But as I say, the focus still at the moment is with dealing with this crisis, driving the numbers down. You saw from the presentation at the beginning of this, we are continuing to make progress with that. Over time, we will look at the lessons from around the world and look at those comparisons when it can be meaningfully done and learn appropriate lessons. So thank you for those questions. And that concludes this afternoon's press conference. Thank you very much.